Chapter 24, Man Without a Country. Pull over at the next phone booth, Ari told the driver. I just remembered an important call I have to make. See that one up ahead? On the right. I'll just be a minute. Inside the booth, Ari dialed Roger's office at the consortium's headquarters, a number that Roger had never given him and would be surprised to discover that he knew. The receptionist gave him to Roger's secretary. I'm sorry, but Mr. Dunn is in a meeting right now. May I take a message and have him call you? You can tell Mr. Dunn that the man he's looking for is calling, said Ari evenly, and if he's not on the line in 30 seconds, I'm hanging up. Roger was on the phone almost immediately. Hello? Good afternoon. How did you get this number? Where are you? Why did you close my accounts? I was going to explain that, Ari. The answer came too quickly, too smoothly. I've been trying to get in touch with you all day. We need to get together to talk. There are some procedures we have to work out. That's the last lie I want to hear. Now listen to me. I'm going to walk up to the front door of the Banque du Monde International in 10 minutes. I want you to come from your office down to the street and meet me out in front with Jean Bourbonnais beside you. Bourbonnais? Yes, Bourbonnais. What? He's the chairman of the bank. I couldn't get somebody like him to meet you, certainly not on such short notice. And in the street? Come on, he's got nothing to do with your accounts anyway. I said no more lies. He's the chairman of the European branch of your group. I've had moles inside your organization for 15 years. I know everything. The order's been given to terminate me, right? There was a long silence. Okay, Ari. You can't get away, so I'll admit it. I'm sorry it's come to this, but there's nothing I can do about it. You know too much. Wrong, Roger. You desperately need me. Alive. Now, you listen carefully. I know everything. If I'm killed, or if you harm anyone that you suspect of working for me, it will be the worst mistake you ever made. If I should die or disappear under any circumstances, there are half a dozen people in key places around the world who will immediately have access to data exposing your entire international network. And they'll publicize it in every major newspaper. I'm talking about everything from drug money laundering to arms smuggling, selling poison gas technology to Iraq, helping Pakistan's nuclear arms program. I could go on and on. There was a long silence on Roger's end. Am I getting through to you? Demanded Ari. I get the picture, came the glum response at last. Now, is there any reason why Bourbonnais can't meet with me in 10 minutes? He'll be there. Ari jumped back into the cab. Forget Place d'Enfer. Take me to the headquarters of Banque du Monde International. As the cab pulled up in front of the bank, Ari surveyed the scene. Bourbonnais, a tall, thin man in his early 60s, with neatly groomed gray hair and mustache and aristocratic bearing, was standing out in front, waiting for him. Roger was at his side, scanning the traffic anxiously. The pedestrian flow seemed normal. Of course, there would be security people scattered everywhere, but there was nothing he could do about that. They weren't going to shoot him in front of all those witnesses. This is it, said Ari. I won't need you any more. He handed the cabbie a 200-franc note and stepped out onto the sidewalk. Bourbonnais was as suave and obsequious as a politician stumping for votes. He extended his hand cordially when Ari walked up to him and suggested in a cultured voice, Professor Mueller, it's such a pleasure to meet you at last. Let's go into my office where we can talk things over in private. Ignoring the proffered hand, Ari shot back tersely, after we have an understanding. From an inside coat pocket, he pulled out a dozen sheets of paper and unfolded them. That's so you'll know I'm not bluffing, he said as he handed them to Bourbonnais. The documents I've given to several people for safekeeping run to more than 250 pages, all of it packed with information and confirmation sources similar to what you're looking at now. Bourbonnais skimmed the contents rapidly, with Roger looking apprehensively over his shoulder. Where'd you get this propaganda? Demanded the banker, his face red with anger after he'd scanned the first 3 or 4 pages. You can't prove any of this. Keep reading, suggested Ari calmly, including Roger in his cold stare. Gentlemen, you know and I know that you're sitting on the biggest banking and criminal scandal in history. And I've got it all laid out in spades. Those pages are just samples. The two men went back to their reading, this time more carefully. Soon, Bourbonnais' fingers were trembling as he turned the pages. At last he folded the sheets of paper and stuffed them into his pocket. The color had gone out of his face, and when he looked at Ari, his eyes betrayed the fact that he was convinced and ready to negotiate. "Okay," said Bourbonnais reluctantly. "You've got your life insurance, but we've got some serious problems to work out. Let's go to my office." "You understand what happens if I don't come out of there alive," emphasized Ari. "I do, and we don't want that any more than you do." Bourbonnais looked at Roger for confirmation. He nodded grimly. Once inside his spacious suite on the 20th floor, Jean Bourbonnais pointed Ari and Roger to a sofa and sat down to face them in an overstuffed executive chair behind his huge desk. "Now, you say there are 250 pages. How do I know?" the old fox demanded, sounding shrewdly confident now that he was safely inside his lair. "You're going to have to take my word for that," said Ari firmly. "That's not good enough. I want to see them. I want proof." Ari opened his briefcase, pulled out another 30 or 40 pages, and threw them onto the banker's well-ordered desk. "That's all you get. I'm not telling you everything I know, but if you're looking for your name, you'll find it in there prominently." Roger jumped up to look over his shoulder as Bourbonnais shuffled quickly through the papers, pausing now and then to read a paragraph more carefully and cursing under his breath. Again his face turned varying shades, from pink to crimson and finally ashen white. He let the papers fall from his hands onto the desk, leaned back in his chair, and fixed Ari with a desperate stare. Roger gave Ari a look that was part loathing, part admiration, and returned to the sofa, where he slumped down and looked expectantly to the man in charge. "You've put your cards on the table," said Bourbonnais grudgingly. "It looks like a winning hand. You're a very clever man, Dr. Mueller, which is why we stuck with you all these years. But there are several concerns. Let's take them one at a time." "Let's do that," responded Ari coldly. "First of all, I give you my word that from this moment on we have no lethal designs against you. In fact, we'll assign some of our best men to stay with you day and night to make certain you're fully protected." "I wouldn't give you 2 centimes for your word," said Ari matter-of-factly. "We're talking this over because neither of us has any choice, right?" Bourbonnais nodded somberly. "As for your protection," added Ari testily, drawing his thumb quickly across his neck, "I've had it up to here, and I don't want one more minute of it. Suppose someone else terminates you." "I can take care of myself," cut in Ari. "Suppose you die from natural causes," argued Bourbonnais. "No fault of ours. But your friends, under the orders you've given to them, so Roger tells me, will publicize this information. That's not our intent, is it?" "If I'm dead, I couldn't care less. Just hope it doesn't happen." "Wait a minute," interjected Roger. "Look, I'm still relatively young, in excellent health, and I intend to stay that way. But if it happens, you'd better be quick to prove it's natural." Bourbonnais turned to Roger, whose only response was a resigned shrug. "I don't like it," complained Bourbonnais, "but that's down the line. Our immediate problem is a matter of asylum." "What do you mean, asylum?" demanded Ari quickly. "Just that. We have to find a country that will take you." "A country that will take me? What's wrong with France? I'm staying right here." "That's out of the question." "What are you trying to pull?" "Let me explain," said Bourbonnais in a patient voice, as though he were talking with an important client. "You've been at the top of the Interpol wanted list for the last 10 years. That was part of the reason for the protection you didn't like. We've held them off until Eastern Europe was behind us. There's no way you could stay in France or any other country connected with the Interpol network." "You're lying. I've committed no crimes." "You owe millions in back taxes and penalties to the French government for funds deposited in a number of accounts that you never reported as income. You've been living under a false ID for the past 25 years, crossing borders with fraudulent documents, passing money internationally through illegitimate channels. Do you need to hear more? The money came from your companies, which incriminates you. Wrong. You're very clever, but we outsmarted you on this one. Those companies that gave you the money were all involved in illegal activities, but no one's been able to trace the people behind them. The canceled checks were recovered by the police in a shootout with a drug kingpin. He was killed, and the checks were found in his briefcase. The bank accounts where they were deposited belonged to you, under fictitious names. And if I'm arrested, I'll tell them where it came from. And we'll sue you for libel. You can't show any connection to us. We know you tried to trace those companies and couldn't. Ari stared out of the window at the skyline of Paris stretching to the horizon. Sounds like I'm a man without a country, he conceded at last. Believe me, we'd prefer to have you here, said Bourbonnais, but it wouldn't look good, would it, if we tried to pull strings for such a criminal? Of course not, responded Ari sarcastically. I certainly wouldn't want that crime to taint your immaculate conscience. I'm glad you understand that everything has to be according to the law. That's the way we operate. Of course it is, returned Ari bitterly, when you want to make sure I don't get back in business. That's part of the deal, and we want that promise in writing. Forget it, snapped Ari. I'm making no promises, and you couldn't enforce a deal anyway. You going to threaten to kill me? If I die or disappear, we don't have to enforce anything. The confidence had returned to Bourbonnais' voice. You're persona non grata all over Europe, East or West, the United States, South America. The Soviets won't let you enter their country. The visa you've got for your flight to Moscow tomorrow has been revoked. You couldn't have boarded the plane. And the Chinese know you are the foreign agent behind Tiananmen. We've seen to that. Thanks, said Ari, controlling himself with great effort. Go on, I'm listening. Switzerland might take you, suggested Bourbonnais, or some island in the Pacific. Fiji, maybe, or New Caledonia, or even New Zealand. Someplace far away where you won't get yourself into any more trouble. Ari shrugged. Okay, I guess I stay right here in this office under your protection until we find a country that will take me. And if we don't? We will. Bourbonnais picked up the phone and buzzed his secretary. Get me the Prime Minister of Fiji, or the official in charge of New Caledonia, and if neither is available at the moment, then try the Prime Minister of New Zealand. Get them at home, or on a golf course or yacht, anywhere you can reach them. It's an emergency. He put the phone down and leaned back in his chair. Let's hope this doesn't take too long, said Bourbonnais with a veiled smile. What would you gentlemen like to drink?